When you guys got a lot of great looks, I think especially Kyrie just didn't miss them. When you have a game like that after playing together for so long this season, all the ups and downs, do you say anything after a game like that? Is it kind of just move on to the next? How do you approach that?
Just focus on the next game. I think we really got good shots. We just didn't make them, but. We got to go game by game. Now the game one is over. We got to watch film, what we do wrong, and focus only on the next one.
What can the Dallas Mavericks learn from their game one loss to the Boston Celtics that'll give them confidence they can even up this series at one game apiece? This is Inside the Mavs. Welcome to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura. I'm your host, Kevin Gray, Mavericks Pre and Post Game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me here for the latest episode of Inside the Mavs. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you watch this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video and let me know how you're feeling about the Mavericks after game one of the NBA Finals. And you can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Mavericks dropped game one by 18 to the Boston Celtics, 107-89. Kristaps Porzingis coming off the bench for the Celtics gave them a tremendous boost as the Mavericks lose game one of the finals, out dropping to 1-6 in game ones under Jason Kidd. But we know how well his teams have adjusted when it comes to winning these series, especially in this postseason. They'll need some of that confidence and remembering of that history to be able to turn things around in Boston going into game number 2. On today's episode, the positives that the Mavericks can take from what happened in game one, despite losing by 18 and getting outscored at the three-point line by 27, that will give them some confidence going into game 2 to try and even up this series at one game apiece. Luka Doncic having the 30 points and the 10 rebounds that he had in game number 1. But the big number staring us in the face after game 1 is the number 1 in terms of the assists that the Mavericks had from Luka Doncic. And normally when Luka Doncic is able to find his guys, they're able to knock down shots. But in game 1, they were only 1 of 6 when Luka Doncic passed them the ball. Going into the NBA Finals, the Mavericks had been shooting 57% on Luka Doncic passes. That didn't necessarily happen in game 1 against the Celtics. You give Boston a lot of credit. The defense that they played, whether they were switching or playing straight up, they were able to really bottle up the rest of the Dallas Mavericks, including Kyrie Irving, who only had 12 points and was a negative 19 in game 1. Kyrie Irving now having lost 11 straight games to the Boston Celtics since leaving Boston several years ago. But that really doesn't matter right now. What matters is the fact that the Mavericks found themselves getting crushed from the three-point line, especially in the first half, and Kristaps Porzingis, who came back from his calf injury to play in game 1 of the finals, having been out since late April with that calf injury, really gave the Celtics some great bench play with his 11 points that he scored in the first quarter off the bench. The Mavericks also saw the Celtics go 7 of 15 from downtown. And if you're the Mavericks, you simply can't allow the Celtics to go on the kinds of runs that they did. In fact, the run that they went on the first quarter, Boston went on what was a 25-7 run to close the final 7 minutes of that first quarter, led 37-20 at the end of 1. And as you look at the final 3 quarters of the game, the Mavericks were only outscored by a point. What was, I thought, a couple of turning points in game 1 that could give them confidence going into game 2, we'll discuss here. But if you're the Mavericks, you simply have got to get out onto shooters, and you've got to be able to be a little bit more disciplined. One of the plays that really told me that the Mavericks may have been a little bit shell-shocked by the moment was the fact that on the very first play of the game, Al Horford gets a dunk off of a pump fake, getting Daniel Gafford into the air. The next thing you know, Al Horford is driving from the three-point line all the way to the rim for a basket. That can't happen against this Celtics team whose 5-out offense is too good, where they spread out the floor, and they've got a number of guys that can shoot the ball from the three-point line. Kristaps Porzingis doing it all in that first quarter, whether it be knocking down three-pointers, getting block shots on Josh Green dunks attempts in transition, being able to come back down the floor to hit jumpers at the mid-post and being able to knock down shots at the elbow as well. Kristaps Porzingis got everything and anything that he wanted in that first half, whether I mentioned at the elbow, knocking down jumpers from there, being able to shoot over smaller defenders, whether it be Josh Green at times or others. Porzingis made his presence felt early and often in game one, and the Mavericks simply couldn't respond. Doncic had 7 points in that first quarter, but the Mavericks shot just 2 of 8 from the three-point line in the first period and saw themselves give up that massive run with the amount of momentum that Porzingis created for them off the bench. And if Boston's calculus in this series is going to be, look, let Luka Doncic go get his, where he had 30 and 10, the first 30-point double-double in a finals debut since Tim Duncan did that back in 1999. But Kyrie Irving only with the 12 points on 6 of 19 shooting, making things difficult on him. Boston's calculus, at least in game one, it was, we'll stay home on everyone else, whether it be PJ Washington or other shooters, and we're going to try to make Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving beat us on the offensive end. But when you start to look at the way things started to turn around, especially in game one, where, yes, the Celtics at one point found themselves up 58-29 with 4 minutes left in the first half. The Mavericks, who had seen themselves cut the lead to 19 with 6 minutes left, the Celtics went again on another big run, which was the theme of game one, the amount of big, massive runs that Boston went on. They went on a 10-0 run to extend their lead to 29, but the Mavericks closed the final 4 minutes of the first half on what was a 13-5 run. Luka Doncic had 10 points in that second quarter, and they were down by 21 at halftime. But you could feel the momentum start to change for the Mavericks and the way that they started to settle in, because even Kyrie Irving talked about that postgame, the fact that the Mavericks, it took a while for them to settle in. And when you kind of go back and watch the game and watch the tape itself, the Mavericks at times got out of character, and the Boston Celtics can tend to do that to you when they are guarding with the length that they had. Jaylen Brown was absolutely terrific in game one with his block shots on Derrick Jones Jr., whether it be on dunk attempts, ending lob attempts. Jaylen Brown's individual effort on the defensive end was stellar in game one. But if you're looking for signs of confidence going into game number two, you can start to look at what happened in the 11-minute span, the final 4 minutes of the first half and the first 7.5 minutes of the third quarter, where you saw the Mavericks at the end of the first half go on that 13-5 run, as I mentioned. You saw Luka Doncic be able to get to 10 points in that second quarter, knocking down a 3 to cut the lead to 21 going into halftime. And you felt that the Mavericks were starting to find something. You look at the second quarter numbers where they were only outscored by 4. You were able to hold Boston to what was 4 of 12 from the three-point line at 33%. But again, the Mavericks weren't making enough shots, especially from deep, and they went 1 of 5 from the three-point line. And one of the things that will go forward and what the Mavericks cannot fall into trap is trying to keep up with the numbers game of the Celtics because of how well they do shoot from the three-point line. This was the number one team in the NBA this season, making nearly 17 threes per game and shooting at nearly 39% from three, which was second in the league this year. They have decided to try and bend the math, and what they are willing to live with are the tough contested twos that the Mavericks will have to take at times against the lengthy Boston defense. And you saw that in game number one, which means if you're the Mavericks, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are going to have to take what the Celtics give them, which is at times those floaters in the middle of the lane, which Luka Doncic, you saw on a couple of occasions, didn't necessarily take when he had those open shots in the middle of the lane and inside the paint. They will need to take those and make those at a consistent rate, and then hopefully some things begin to open up, because Boston is going to dare the rest of these other Mavericks to beat them, and it's going to be up to the PJ Washingtons of the world, the Derrick Joneses of the world, and others when they have those opportunities to do so. Because one thing Boston did in game one that the Mavericks love to do is take corner threes. Boston doesn't allow you to take corner threes. And then when the corner threes that you do get on occasion, their opponents don't shoot very well on those. And you saw that in game one. The Mavericks' inability to shoot the ball well from the three-point line, particularly in the corners, and the fact that Boston stayed home on everyone else to try and make Luka and Kyrie beat them. But in going into game two, if you're Dallas, Luka and Kyrie setting the tone on the offensive end, both of them together taking what the defense gives them in order to give them a better opportunity to open up some things for everyone else on the floor. Let's take a quick break here on Inside the Mavs as we get more on terms of what we can take positively from game one, despite the 18-point loss that could shed some light on what can happen in game number two. But before we get there, let's hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast. Let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs, thank you for hanging out with us to our spot today, and thank you to today's sponsor of our video and our podcast in Aura as the Mavericks search for positives after their 18-point loss in game number one, where they had their worst half-court offensive rating in any game in the playoffs thus far, being held to a playoff low 89 points in game number one against the Boston Celtics. But if we're looking for positives, we started to detail the stretch that the Mavericks went on between the last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 7.5 minutes of the third quarter. In that 11.5-minute span, you saw the Mavericks close the first half on a 13-5 run, and then in that third quarter, opened up the first 7.5 minutes of the period on what was a 22-9 run to eventually close the game to within 8. And part of that, of course, was Luka Doncic's offensive onslaught in that third quarter. But more importantly, the Mavericks started to lock down defensively against the Celtics. When you look at what Boston did from three in that third quarter, they were 4 of 12 from the three-point line, but started off 1 of 7 from three in that third period. And the Mavericks themselves found their way to climb back into the game, led by Luka Doncic. You were able to get some things happening in transition. PJ Washington getting a layup in transition. Doncic knocking down another three-pointer that cut the lead to 13 midway through the third period. And then Kyrie Irving getting some things going. Got a tough fadeaway to go over Kristaps Porzingis. So again, your two main guys with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving spearheading things. Doncic mainly when you look at what he did in that third quarter with the 10 points that he had. Kyrie Irving had 6 points. Yes, I know, on 3 of 10 shooting, but at the same time, those were the guys leading the charge to get the Mavericks back into the game. And eventually they were able to cut the lead down for the Celtics to just 8 at 72-64. But during that span, you saw the Mavericks be able to get out in transition, be able to knock down some shots from the outside from the three-point line. Even though they went 2 of 8 from three, those are the kinds of things you've got to be able to start doing to be able to lock down defensively. And more importantly, they held the Celtics to just 33% from the field in that third period. And if that can be the case, those are some things that you could take as positives with you if you're the Mavericks going into game 2. And most importantly, if you're the Mavericks, you've got to find a way to move the basketball. We talked about at the beginning, the most concerning number coming out of game 1 was the number 1, which was the amount of assists that Luka Doncic had in that game. Kyrie Irving talking about that after the game for game 1 on what the Mavericks will need to do to avoid getting into those traps in terms of playing some of that isolation to be able to continue to move the basketball. Here's what Kyrie Irving had to say.
Kyrie, obviously with you and Luka, you guys have two of the best one-on-one players in the world, but ball wasn't moving tonight. How do you avoid, with the way that the Celtics play defensively, falling into kind of the trap of relying on isolation and becoming stagnant?
I don't necessarily agree that it's a trap, that they want to set us. I think that they really rely on their great defensive ball pressure, their one-on-one defenders, and they funnel us into certain areas. I mean, even as I say that they're relying on the one-on-one, every time I got an ISO, there's, almost 2-3 people waiting for me to get in there. So I got to catch the ball on a live dribble and just be aware of my opportunities. It's uncharacteristic for us to have only 9 assists. The ball's got to move a little bit more. And again, that starts with me just being able to push the pace, get us some easy opportunities, and just adjust to what they're throwing at us. So it's a fun series. It was fun just, going into the game. It's still going to be fun, but there's going to be a level of chess that still has to be played. And, game 1 was just about adjustments. We obviously wanted to win this basketball game, gave ourselves a chance in the second half when we were down by 8. Then they brought it up to 16, and they got up to 22 when we called the timeout. So I'm just going to be replaying some of these possessions. But, at the same time, look at some of the positives that we can carry on to game 2.
So for the Mavericks, it's going to be about getting the ball moving a little bit more. You saw in game number 1, the Mavericks had 0 lob dunks. They only attempted 2 threes from the corner, uncharacteristic of this team who, of course, loves to get up and down the floor, especially not only in transition, but also in the vertical game. And Derek Lively had a rough go of it, of course, in his first NBA Finals game with the 5 fouls that he had. But if you're Luka and Kyrie, Luka had the 1 assist. Kyrie only had 2 assists, even though Luka Doncic had the 30 points in the game. Non-Luka Mavs shooters went 17 of 48 in game 1 at 35% and 1 of 12 from the three-point line. Others are going to have to be able to come with Doncic in terms of the scoring. But if you're looking for other positives going into game 2, the Mavericks have won every game 2 so far this postseason. They haven't lost back-to-back games since March 5th. They know how to make those adjustments. And part of that adjustment will be finding ways to generate offense outside of Luka Doncic. And that's going to be predicated on ball movement and being able to find ways to penetrate that good defense that the Celtics played in game number 1. And you're going to have to avoid allowing the big runs that the Celtics are able to make. We talked about the 22-9 start that the Mavericks went on in the first 7.5 minutes in game number 1 in that third quarter. The Celtics responded with what was a 14-0 run, capped off by what was a Jaylen Brown three-pointer that eventually pushed the lead back up to 22, and that simply can't happen. If you can limit the runs of the Celtics, who, yes, with that 5-out offense, with a number of guys, including Sam Hauser with that quick trigger that he has that you saw from that left corner 3 where he's getting the ball out of his hands in 0.37 seconds. You've got to rotate on shooters to be able to cut off some of those three-point attempts that Boston loves to take. We know how many threes they want to give up. They want to try to get up 43s in a game and knock down as many of those as they can, but also at times trying to avoid the trap of trying to keep up from the three-point line. Luka Doncic is talking about that post-game after game 1 as well, about what it takes to stay within the game and not getting outside of yourself, even when the Boston Celtics are knocking down shots from 3. Take a listen.
We all know that Boston makes a ton of threes. Is the challenge more to take that away, or for you guys to have to make more to kind of keep up, knowing that they're going to make at least some?
I mean, obviously, I think they're the best three-point shooting team in the NBA. So sometimes really hard to take those away, especially when they have 5 guys out. They can all shoot. So obviously, we got to make more. We didn't make enough shots today to beat them, but we got to be better on both ends.
So for the Mavericks, it's going to be about staying who they are and staying true to themselves, staying locked into their defensive principles, getting out and rotating on shooters, knocking down a few more threes, because you can't go 7 of 27 against the Celtics shooting 26% from three. I think you're going to keep up in a game where they're bombing away from the three-point line. But also in the second half, you started to notice you're getting a little bit more physical with Kristaps Porzingis. In the first half, he got to pretty much every spot that he wanted to get to, whether it be from the three-point line in transition, whether it be on the elbow, whether it be a little bit in the mid-post. He was doing a lot of the things that Kristaps Porzingis has been able to do, and on the defensive end, affecting shots as well with his shot blocking and rim protection, because Jason Tatum, yes, had 16 in the game, but you also saw he had 6 turnovers, continuing to put pressure on Boston from a turnover standpoint, and that's some of the things that you were able to do in that 13-5 run to close the first half, and then opening up on a 22-9 run in the first 7.5 minutes of that third quarter. Ball pressure and being able to put Tatum and Brown in spots where they're turning over the basketball, but also valuing possession and being able to score when you have the opportunities to, because it's going to be imperative for the others of the Mavericks to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. When you have guys like Kyrie Irving, P.J. Washington, and Derrick Jones Jr. going a combined 1 of 10 from the three-point line, and you see the Celtics making 16 threes in game 1, they threw the first punch. But again, another thing that you can look at in terms of positives for the Mavericks, they've been a great counter-punching team throughout the course of the regular season and into the postseason, and they did not give up on game 1, which has been a theme that we've seen throughout the postseason, whether it was coming back from being down by 31 points against the Los Angeles Clippers to eventually take a lead, even though they fell in game 4 to the Clippers. You've seen this team time and time again be able to keep themselves in games and not let go of the rope. And if you're going into game 2, now that you have kind of felt what Boston has been able to bring to you in terms of their defense, whether it be the switching, the guarding straight up, and being able to have the effect that Kristaps Porzingis did, as well as Jaylen Brown and the individual defensive effort that he was putting forward, now you have an idea of what to expect going into game number 2. Can Jason Kidd and his coaching staff make the necessary adjustments to be able to execute better on the offensive end, create some of that offense with better ball movement so that Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving can find these guys to be able to get to the rim? Can you get some of that vertical game going for Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, who were rendered pretty much ineffective in game 1, because their abilities to have to guard out in space and deal with Horford and with Porzingis, especially shooting from the three-point line. And Porzingis, another aspect that he brought to the Celtics in game 1 is his ability to take the ball off the dribble and be able to get to the rim. You've got to stay disciplined when dealing with the bigs of the Celtics in order to try and win the series. But if you're the Mavericks, you were able to stay pretty much even with the Celtics through the final 3 quarters. You absorbed the punch. You were able to make a run of your own. Unfortunately, the Celtics punched right back and were able to up their lead back up to 22, pretty much putting the game away at the end of the third quarter. But now you have a chance going into game 2 to be much more aggressive from the outset. Kyrie Irving being able to do so. You saw in that first quarter when the Mavericks were able to get 4 straight points from him to eventually take a quick lead there, what his aggressiveness does to the mindset of the Mavericks, and you saw that change quite quickly for Dallas. That will have to be a consistent theme in game 2. Not only the aggressiveness of Luka Doncic on the offensive end, but Kyrie Irving doing the same as well, and defensively running this Celtics team off the three-point line as much as you can, whether it be Derek White, whether it be Hauser, whether it be Porzingis. You get the drift that there's a lot of these guys that can shoot the ball well from the three-point line. In fact, the Celtics set a finals record having at least 7 guys make at least 2 3-pointers. They had 7 guys make at least 2 threes. That's an NBA finals record. So that just gives you an idea of the amount of depth that they've got in terms of guys that can knock down shots from the outside. But for the Mavericks, it's time to regroup. As we mentioned just a little bit ago, have won every game 2 of the postseason thus far. Haven't lost back-to-back games since March the 5th. They know how to respond when they're down 0-1. They've been here plenty of times. And now, after what they did in the second, third, and fourth quarters to be able to keep themselves in this game and to play alongside the Boston Celtics, they give themselves a shot going into game 2. Is it going to be difficult? Yes. Are you going to have to play at an extremely high level to deal with this extremely talented 64-win team in the Celtics? Sure you are. But it doesn't matter that the Mavericks, they do have the capability of being able to do so. And it starts by sharing the basketball, getting some of that vertical game going, and running the Celtics off the three-point line as much as they can. If they do, they will have a chance to even up the series at 1 game apiece as they get ready to come back to Dallas for games 3 and 4. But a tough way to start the NBA Finals for Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, and this Mavericks team. But at the same time, there are some positives that you can take, mostly being that you absorb the punch from the Celtics. You were able to make a run of your own. Now you've got to find a way to cut off some of those bigger runs in game 2 going forward to give yourself a chance. And most importantly, defending at the kind of level that you're capable of that we've seen throughout the course of the second half of the regular season and into this postseason for the Mavericks. But a tough game 1 loss to the Celtics, but things and positives to take forward as we get ready for game 2. We'll have plenty more of getting your preview for game 2 with Grant Afseth here on the Inside the Mavs podcast. Plenty of other coverage as well throughout the course of this NBA Finals as the Mavericks look to make it a long series against the Eastern Conference champion Boston Celtics. That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating, write a review for it while you're there. And you can, if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video as well. And follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. This has been Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura.